The next missionary skill that we're going to discuss is mapping. Now, when you first hear the word mapping, you probably think of a paper map. Maybe you think of like cartographers that would, explorers who would discover new lands, and maybe originally that was mapping. But when we talk about missionary mapping, what we mean is getting sort of the lay of the land of the place and the people to whom we've been sent. So it's this idea that if I want to engage in ministry on campus, I have to get to know the campus. And so often, gospel ministers, well-intentioned though they may be, they want to move into ministry as quickly as possible. And so the first thing they do is try to engage people, try to share the gospel. And I want to say if those opportunities arise, you should take them. Nevertheless, a good missionary will spend a good bit of time in getting the lay of the land and engaging in what we call mapping. Now, a missionary map or a ministry map actually has multiple layers. So think of it like this. Initially, at the most basic layer, you have the physical layer of the map. And then you start to look beyond just the physical location, the environment. You start to see the social layer, the people, who they are, what they're like, what life is like for them, what matters to them. So the social layer. And then the third layer is one that is probably most important for gospel ministry, but also the most difficult to sort of discern. And that's the spiritual layer of our map, the spiritual reality around us in our ministry environments. So mapping is basically gathering information, gathering insight, and putting it down, recording it somewhere. Now, a lot of people, when they engage in missionary mapping, they'll use an app, right? They'll bust out their iPad and use an app to record things. You can start with a map, a printed map even, a map book, something like that. Some of my favorite ministers in the world put a giant map on the wall just to help them understand the places to which they've been sent, those places they want to engage in ministry. And they use this map to help organize their thoughts, their understanding of the place that they want to be disciples and make disciples. So mapping is just that. It's recording, it's gaining insight through observation, and recording what we see so that we can then start to get a clearer picture, a three-dimensional picture, really, of what's going on and how we might engage people in gospel ministry. The first layer of our map is the physical layer. Now, the physical layer is literally the environment in which we find ourselves. So imagine if you wanted to engage in gospel ministry on a campus. College campus, you show up, the very first thing you might want to go for is one of those maps of the campus. Now, don't bring it out because that'll make you stand out like a tourist, but just look at a map, study the map, and get a sense of what is where. Where are the buildings? Where are the public spaces? Where are traffic patterns going to be? You can start to look at that physical layer and really recognize, oh, this is the environment. And a campus has boundaries. You're either on campus or then you go off campus. And in certain campuses, a lot of the activity happens off campus, right? So just being aware of the scope of my ministry, the scope of my field, can really inform a gospel ministry. So the missionary skill of engaging with mapping starts with the physical layer. Our physical layer, by the way, starts to draw out elements. Certain things matter more than others. And so we can start to look at the physical aspects of the environment, the paths that people take, the routes that they travel along. And if you really want to get to know someone and you want to see the world as they see it, if you want to engage in ministry on campus, follow their paths, walk along the same routes, and take the same modes of transportation that students and others take, and you'll really get a sense of how they see their world. Or those nodes where paths come together. Those are places usually that are really happening. There's usually activity in nodes. There's more people in a node. The problem is that's also where guards go up and people are prepared for a lot of noise. So you start to think about the wisdom of engaging people. If you want to engage in conversation, just recognize how people's behavior changes as they enter into a node. And then we have those districts. Now, usually you think of districts and neighborhoods in a city, but even a campus has different zones, different neighborhoods, if you will, places where certain behavior is expected, places where dedicated to certain activities. And so you have to start to recognize what each neighborhood of a campus looks like in order to understand their significance to your ministry. And then you have those edges, those places where one neighborhood or one area of campus then gives way to another. And edges often are those places where people don't cross over. Edges are really important because we find that even on a college campus, proximity does not equal similarity. You can have two people that live nearby or study in buildings right next door to each other, but their experiences can be radically different because there's an edge that divides them. And then landmarks. A college campus usually is set up around landmarks. Maybe it's a certain building or chapel or a monument or a statue or a fountain. They're main thoroughfares. There are administrative buildings and things where that stand out. These are those things that people use to navigate the campus. So we collect all those things and we start to annotate our map. Again, whether it's a paper map or a digital map, with what we observe. And these are the things that then equip us to recognize the different fields of ministry available to us. That's the physical layer. On top of that, we have the social layer. That's the people layer. And in order to understand people, we have to observe them. And I want to encourage you, spend a lot of time watching. A good missionary mapper will spend a lot of time deliberately watching people. Not in a creepy way, but in a way that says, hey, I want to get to know who you are and how you think. So we encourage you to spend some time observing. But it's not just observation. You can only learn so much by observing people. The next way to go even deeper is to engage in discussion, in conversation. So asking good questions. What are you studying? What do you do? How do you spend your time? Why do you spend your time like that? How do you spend your money? What's important to you? What worries you? And as you get to know people, then you can start to get some depth in your map and not just have statistics and demographic information of who's where, who you observe, but also what are they thinking about? What do they care about? So that's the social layer. And the social layer is one of those that's ongoing. We'll continue to annotate our map throughout the life of our ministry in order to make sure we're constantly learning more about who is in our field of service. And then on top of all of that, we have the spiritual layer of the map. The spiritual layer is really God's activity. Where do we see him at work? Usually we begin the spiritual layer with marking churches or places of worship, those places that worship the Most High God and those places that worship idols and lesser things. And we put those on our map because those tend to have spiritual significance in a place. Campuses have ministry opportunities. They have different campus ministries. Put those on your map. Churches, local churches, mark those on your map. But increasingly, there are prayer rooms and mosques and temples and shrines and other things popping up across campuses. Make sure those are on your spiritual layer as well. When we start to look at the different layers of the map, then new insights come to light. We can start to see certain traffic patterns around certain parts of campus and certain types of people. And when you start to bring those things together, it really gives you good insight for where to engage and how to engage. A lot of people ask, well, I don't know where to begin. Mapping is a way to get the basic information that you need so that you can make smart choices about the beginning of ministry and the continuation of ministry. And the best part about mapping is when you bring in a new colleague, a new supporter, a new worker, a volunteer to help in your ministry, you can not just throw them in the deep end, you can say, here's the map of all that we've learned about this campus or about these people. Use it and help us develop this map. So learn from it and then help us continue to build our collective insight into what's going on and where God's at work and where we as his people can follow him.